Hello, this is Lone Carr, and welcome to Authors on iTours, a podcast devoted to authors, book bloggers, and other book lovers alike. Hello, welcome back to Authors on iTours, and today we have a special treat for you today. We have a guest interviewer. Trent Short is interviewing his father, Travis Short. Travis is the writer and author of several books, including Anna, A Life of Faith and Courage, which is currently on tours with Irie Book Tours. He's also written Killers Can't Hide and The Adventures of Faraday Fox. Among other books, he has also published the illustrated epic poem Old White Men, a story of the sacrifices by America's warriors since 1775. His favorite pastime is writing short stories, many of which are contained in this book. Retired as a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy, he pursued a career in shipbuilding and manufacturing. He has extensive experience in technical writing and business consulting. He is a graduate from the United States Navy Postgraduate School, Monterey, California, with a degree in engineering sciences. Travis is the father of 4 daughters and 3 sons, one of which is Trent, who's interviewing him today. And he currently resides in Moss Point, Mississippi, with his constant companion, a Lhasa Apso named Choi. Be sure to check the links down below to connect with Travis, his website, Facebook, X, and on Goodreads. So take it away, Trent.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Trent Short, and today I am interviewing my father and author, Travis Short, who has authored and published several books that are available to buy on Amazon and several other outlets. This morning, we're going to discuss his 4 most recent books. They were published by Published Authority of Atlanta in Atlanta, Georgia, and Published Authority was voted the outstanding book publisher of Georgia in 2023, which is a really interesting fact. And my father, he writes a lot of different stories. He writes a lot of different genres, honestly. And we'll discuss this in the 4 books that we're going to talk about today. I think you'll see sort of the breadth of what he can do. It's very interesting. The first book we're going to talk about is called Anna, Life of Faith and Courage. And this is, I think, what would be considered a historical fiction. The second is a book called The Adventures of Faraday Fox. And it's a story for children. It's actually called Adventures of Faraday Fox, a story for young readers. So we'll say young readers because it is a very neat children's book. Very, very cool with some beautiful illustrations. And the third book is called Killers Can't Hide. And this is a murder mystery. And finally, The Corners of My Mind is his compendium of 31 short stories. And just by that alone, I think you can see that he's really spanning a lot of genres and styles of writing, which is very, very cool. So I want to go ahead and get this started. I'm going to bring my dad into the studio. All right. Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, son. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, excellent. I'm glad to. I'm very excited to see how this turns out. I think it's going to be great. So I want to get on with this and ask you this first question because I think this question will set off everything else. I think most people that read your books would agree that your ability to create stories with such a variety of people and situations is just very striking and interesting. And I just want to know what you attribute this to, honestly.
Well, son, I think it is due to a lifetime of living, meeting all kinds of people in different situations. I grew up poor in a coal mining town in Kentucky, and our family and those in our neighborhood were all poor. I can recall a lot of their experiences, and some of those are recounted in my stories. At age 15, I moved to Baltimore. My family moved to Baltimore, and I worked in a grocery store. And my first stories were about people I met when I was delivering groceries to them. I dropped out of high school at 16 and joined the Navy at 17. I was sent to radioman school and quickly learned the Morse code and became bored with it and started writing stories. At that time, there was the tough guy detectives such as Sam Spade and Mike Hammer, where those stories were, a lot of those stories were read by young men my age. And I decided I was going to write a tougher private eye story, and I named mine Pete Pitchfork Private Eye. Later on, many years later, I rewrote that story and made it a little longer and called it My Gun Cries Justice. It's a parody on tough guy detectives. And after getting out of radioman school, of course, I spent 7 years as an enlisted man. Then I was selected for Officer Candidate School. I spent 12 more years in the Navy, advancing through various grades, and retired as a lieutenant commander at age 38. After I retired, and during that time, I was selected to go to Navy Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, where I received my degree in sciences and engineering sciences, and minored in literature and creative writing. After I retired, I went into business. I was chief design engineer for a shipbuilding company, and later opened my own company with two other fellows. And during that time, my experience in the shipyards and heavy industry, I did a lot of technical writing and honed my skills. And people ask me, where do your stories come from? And I say they come from all kinds of sources, from people I meet, from relatives, from things people say, from short sentences I've read, or from dreams I've had. They actually come from the corners of my mind, and that's a lot of those stories are contained in that volume of short stories we'll talk about later.
That's cool. It's a very good answer, honestly. Really good answer. Okay. Well, we are going to talk about the Anna, A Life of Faith and Courage first. Here is that beautiful book cover too. I love this book cover. It's fantastic. But I wanted to ask you how the story came about, because the story, it's the story that makes people want to read about the character of Anna. And it's very interesting to me how you came up with this, because it's considered historical fiction. And I think people actually want to know with the process for Anna itself, because I think it's, personally for me, one of the best things that you've done.
Oh, I agree with you, son. I think what the story means to me is told in the dedication, which says, to Anna, whose true story is embodied in the fictional account of her life, and to my brother James, who befriended her and brought her story to me. My brother, whom I lost last year, he lived in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and I visited him for the last 15 years of his life. And about 12 years ago, his wife was admitted to a convalescent center in Ypsilanti, and he stayed with her every day. And of course, when I visited him, I would go to the convalescent center and stay there also. And while I was there, he introduced me to this to this little woman who was barely 5 feet tall, and she always had a walker with her, but she had a great sense of humor. And I first met her at the fish tank, where she would go down to the aquarium and watch the fish. But she she my brother looked after her, and she adored my brother. After she became frail, he brought her to the room where his wife was staying. She stayed there until she passed away. But she was 96 when I met her, and she would sing with her daughter every month when her daughter came to visit her. She had a wonderful voice, and she played the harmonica. Actually, she played all kinds of instruments, but she carried a harmonica in her pocket, and she would always pull that harmonica out wherever she was, in the cafeteria or in where they were having sessions and for people playing games. She'd break her harmonica out and play it. She and I learned from my brother about her life, and she would call my brother Papa, and she would tease him about telling him he ought to make sure you eat your vegetables, take care of yourself, you're a young man. I'd learned that she had written a memoir. It turned out to be a 20-page memoir. It was in no particular order. But they were events of her life. And my brother gave me a copy of that. And when I read it, I was just astonished at what this little woman had endured throughout her life, what she had overcome. And I decided I had to write the story of Anna.
So then what would you say that it was, if you can be a little specific without giving too much away, what was it about her life that made you want to write about it?
Well, she was born into poverty. Her father was a very talented musician. He was also a drunk. He was cruel to her. Anna's mother would leave and be away for long periods of time, and no one knew where she was. At one period, they learned that she was running a boarding house in Scranton. Anna was kidnapped and taken to Scranton, where she found her mother in Scranton. There are events in her life where she was almost accosted by a drunk. An event where she was, for a birthday celebration, was given a ride in an airplane and failed to fasten her seatbelt. The pilot turned the plane upside down, and nothing happened to her. So she accounted that to a miracle. Same thing with she would go to church devoutly after she was 12 years old. She found religion, and she would go to church devoutly. And she had a meeting scheduled where she was supposed to attend. And it was storming, had a lightning storm, and she prayed to God to end the storm. And she walked the 1.5 miles to church. The storm stopped, and she walked 1.5 miles to church. And during church, the storm started again, and the preacher said, "You can't go home. The weather's too bad." And she said, "No, God will make it stop." And it stopped raining, and she walked home, and without being rained on at all. So those are the kinds of events that made me realize how special she was.
I completely understand. It's just a neat genesis. Is it challenging to write fiction from historical fact? What is that like for you?
Well, it's first of all, you have to stay true to the character. I think one of the biggest things is trying to make sure that your time frames are correct, and you have to speak. Have to continue to speak as the character speaks, so you have to put yourself inside your character. I think I would say that one of the toughest things is to making sure that your sequence of events is correct. That's a tough thing to do, and make sure that if you refer to any historical characters, that you have the information about them correct.
I understand. Exactly. I would assume that, yeah, it's got to be a different path than just getting to work from your own pure creativity and your own pure imagination. Um, I know that Anna, it just seems like Anna as a person, and I guess as a character also, had a very big effect on you. And I'm just interested to know, if you had a last memory of Anna, what might it be?
I think her sense of humor, and also the fact that no matter what she was going through, she always had a positive attitude, and she did not fear death at all. She always talked about being ready to meet Jesus, as she would say. And she said, I'm ready to go there, and I may go any day." So just her attitude is the thing that remains with me, along with her great talent.
That's nice. That's very nice. Well, if you don't mind, I want to move on to Faraday Fox. I think this is a very neat book. I think it's very interesting. I think it's very beautiful. To me, it is your most interesting looking book. And it's got different levels of it because of that, because it's a little delight for the eyes, and the story is also fantastic. So tell us how you came about writing this book for young readers.
Well, son, as you know, I have a wonderful friend by the name of Shirley Adams, who is a very talented artist. And in fact, the Adventures of Faraday Fox contains 21 of her reprints of her paintings. Those are the illustrations in the book itself. But she painted a red fox, and Shirley and I traveled to California to meet my oldest daughter and her husband for vacation, and we took with us that painting of the red fox, which we gave to my daughter. She took it home to her granddaughter, and they named the painting Faraday. So I was so impressed with that name that I decided to write a story about how Faraday got from Dahlonega, Georgia, to a little town of Port Orchard, Washington. And the story starts with Faraday and his twin brother Simon in the den, and her mother goes out to find food for them. And Faraday is he's orphaned, and he travels over to McDonald's farm to find something to eat, and the farmer fires at him, and Faraday leaves the farm and travels up to Shirley's house, and Shirley takes him in and keeps him for a year. And after a year, after he's domesticated, she decides he belongs in his natural habitat. So she takes him to the Cherokee National Forest and releases him. And he meets some unprincipled characters, and then he meets some animals. The first one he meets is Fuzzy Wuzzy the bear. And he goes on and travels into the forest and becomes disillusioned. He decides he's not made for that wild life, so he wants to get back to McDonald's farm. And he tries to find a way to get there. And of course, he hitches rides on. First thing he hitches a ride on is a McDonald's truck, because he thinks it's going back to McDonald's farm. And he ends up hitching rides in bus luggage compartment, in the boxcar, and he finally, all these misadventures, he goes through Memphis in Tennessee, where he meets a dog and has Memphis barbecue. He travels on west and ends up in California. And I don't want to divulge the ending, but that's how the story came about. Each ride, he thinks he's headed back to McDonald's farm, but he ends up further and further away till he gets to California, and finally to Port Orchard, Washington.
I think that's very charming. It's a charming book, honestly. It's fantastic. And you're right, Shirley's illustrations are perfect. It's such a beautiful book. I know a little bit about how the next book came about. Um, uh, this book, Killers Can't Hide, is the next one we're going to talk about. And like I said, I understand where it came from. I know that this is pure fiction. This is completely out of your head. This was what I would call a Travis Short original. But don't give up too much, but can you tell us a little bit about how this story goes?
Sure. Yeah. The story is about the murder of a former beauty queen who operates a quarter horse farm. And she is separated from her wealthy husband. And of course, he becomes the first suspect, and he is arrested by what we call a dim-witted deputy who's opposing the sheriff for re-election in the county of Cumbersome County, Mississippi, with the mythical county seat of Maysville. And Delbert Cantrell, the husband, has to prove his innocence because the sheriff is not going to look for the real killer. And the Delbert hires a famed attorney and a black detective to help him solve the mystery. And it takes them down to the western part of the United States, southwest part of the United States, into Mexico, where and finally they solve the mystery. But the story it has a lot of humor in it, and a lot of street language, I would say. But I found it really a challenge for me to write that story since I hadn't done it before.
Yeah, like I said, I did know a lot about that story. As you know, I got to read a lot of that as you were working on it and stuff like that. And I wanted to give people an idea of how you came up with that and what you did. For your final book, honestly, this is, out of all of these, this is for me personally, if you don't mind me saying, probably my favorite. But you know what a fan I am of your short stories, and I just find them to be just fantastic. I think they are just some of the most architecturally well done things that you do as a writer. They're fantastic and they're really great. So in talking about that, I just wanted you to see if you could give us an idea about some of the stories and where the situations came from for this final book here. I love what you've done. This is a great cover too. I think you did a great job with this. Whoever did this is wonderful work. But yeah, give us an idea of how these situations came from, where you pulled out all these different stories, because there's so many just different characters and situations in your short stories, and they're just really well done. So I'd love it if you could give us an idea of how you do that.
Well, I'll start with the first story, which is called The Crimson Shoes. I don't know where the story came from. I probably saw some crimson shoes and decided to write a story about it. But it's a story about we call him a good-natured doofus who inherited his business from his father when his father swallowed a handful of shoe tacks. And it's set in the 1950s in Charleston, South Carolina. And of course, he falls for Ruby Rhinestone and beautiful girl from across the tracks. And she ends up seducing him. I won't go any further in the story, but it has murder and a few other things in it. And the second story that I want to mention is one which is called In from the Cold, and it's written about a young man I knew when I was growing up who left home and falsified his birth certificate and joined the Army at the age of 16 and was sent immediately to Korea where he was killed 21 days after going ashore. But I took that story and had him going into North Korea and with the 1st Cavalry and getting lost in the mountains and being pursued by the Chinese soldiers. That's the way the story, that's the conclusion of the story. But I start the story with a poem which I like, even though I wrote it, I still like it a lot. It goes this way. Say a prayer for all the boys who are men too soon, who never sleep on satin sheets or eat from silver spoons, who answer first the nation's call whenever danger looms, who fall upon the battlefield and die of mortal wounds. Another story I will mention is called Trimming Trees for God. And this story is about a good old Southern boy who has become wealthy, and his wife, Juniper, who is a avid churchgoer. Now, of course, our character does not go to church, but he supports her and allows her to make massive donations to the church. And one Sunday, while he's home and she's in church, he's searching a radio station to find his favorite country western songs, and runs across a country preacher who trims trees to raise money for his church. And the character becomes enamored with this preacher and decides that his teachings are best because he says that the man is the boss of the house. And of course, this causes controversy between Penelope and our character. That's that story. I have several others that I'll mention just briefly. One of those is called no, I won't go into that one, but I will talk about a story that I call Breaks of the Game. And I happened to be walking one day, and that story just popped into my mind. And it's about a boxer who kills his opponent. First of all, he's a third-rate boxer, gets a chance to fight the middleweight champion of the world, and he kills him in the ring, and has to live with that on his record for facing the reporters and trying to carry out his boxing career. One more story I'll mention is Julius the Talking Dog, which is really based on my little Lhasa Apso, Choi. And the story goes that one day the owner is eating a steak, and of course his wife is off visiting, and the dog says to his owner, "How about a bite of that steak?" And the owner is absolutely amazed. So the dog tells him that he can talk, and that he's he's Buddhist, and that his soul is from one of the khans, and when he dies, he will transfer it to someone else. But he swears his owner to secrecy that he won't tell anybody that he talks. So, but his owner finally talks him into going on to one of the big talk shows. That's the gist of that story. One more and I'll quit. And this story is called Old Men Cry Too Easily. And it's about a 76-year-old man who is going through the throes of Alzheimer's and is preparing to celebrate his 76th birthday with his family. And all the events of his past life come to him, his past loves, his business relationships, his infidelities, and so forth. And then finally, when the story goes further, he's thinking all these things are not actually happening. That's the gist of that story. That kind of, I won't go into any more, but there are 31 total in that, and they vary from all genres.
Having read your short stories, I believe it. It's my favorite, honestly. I love that book. I think it's wonderful work. Um, I think that about wraps up my questions. But if I can ask, I know that there's a book that you do have a book that's about to be published by Published Authority. Do you want to do some plugs? Can we talk about it a little bit, maybe?
Let me just mention those, if I may. Yes, I have a book that's with Published Authority now. It's already been edited and it's ready to go to press, and it's called "Death Comes Over These Mountains," which is historical fiction, and the time frame it starts with the Civil War and goes until almost the end of the century, and it is centered around an actual killing, which is one of the most famous in the state of Virginia in 1892. And I create a fictional family called it's the Wilkins family, and I work them into the events leading to that murder. I won't go any further with that. And then I have a book which I'm on chapter 11, which is called "The Loves and Lies of Lily Lawson," which I think kind of speaks for itself. But like I said, that's already been accepted by my publisher, the first 6 chapters, and I'm on chapter 11. And I expect to be finishing that in the next couple of months and sending that on up for editing. That kind of wraps up what I'm doing at the moment.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. That really kind of concludes all of my questions as well. And thank you for allowing us to get a glimpse into your process and to talk about your books. I'm so honored that you let me do this, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, son.
All right, Dad. Have a great day.
You too.
And that concludes this episode of Authors on iTours. If you enjoyed this episode, then do give us a like and a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe so that you can receive notifications for upcoming episodes of Authors on iTours. In the meantime, happy reading!